Today I'm going to go through how to do a low bar back squat. I'm going to just kind of talk about it in a very general way here, and then I'm going to break it down bit by bit. So a low bar back squat is where you have the bar sitting a little bit lower in the traps rather than higher up. You're going to have a slightly wider stance, and this is a hip dominant squat, which means that most of the load is being placed on your hip, which means you're going to work your posterior chain a little bit more than your anterior chain. This type of squat is ideal for lifting the most amount of weight. You have a slightly reduced range of motion in this movement, and it's going to allow you to lift the most amount of weight you can. It's not for everyone, but I'm going to break it down in depth here for you, for those of you who want to do a low bar back squat. Next thing we're going to go through here is going to be bar position. The bar needs to be sitting relatively low on your traps. So it's not going to be sitting in the upper part of the traps. It's going to be sitting in the lower part of the traps. Basically 2 to 3 inches lower than it would be than if you were doing a high bar back squat. If you squeeze your shoulders together, you're going to create a shelf of muscle, which is basically where the bar is going to be sitting. You're going to understand that based on people's flexibility, the bar is going to either be a little bit lower or a little bit higher. The next thing that we're going to discuss here is going to be foot position. For a low bar back squat, your feet are going to be a little bit wider. What this is going to allow you to do is going to allow you to drive your hips back a little bit easier so that you can sink into a full range of motion low bar back squat. I would recommend shoulder width to slightly wider for your low bar back squat. Next, we're going to discuss hip position when you do this movement. So when we do a low bar back squat, as I mentioned earlier, it is a posterior chain movement. What this means is that due to the fact that we initiate the movement with our hip, it's going to utilize a lot more of our back extensors, our glutes, and our hamstrings to allow us to drive down with the weight and then stand up with the weight. The first thing you want to focus on here is making sure that you initiate the movement by driving those hips back. That is exactly what's going to allow us to utilize the glutes and the hamstrings in this movement, as opposed to starting the movement with a knee flexion, which is going to make the movement a lot more quad dominant, which is going to be very different than what we're looking to achieve here in a low bar back squat. Next here, we're going to discuss depth. When you're doing a low bar back squat, your depth is going to be a little bit different than it would be in a high bar back squat. You're going to find that you can't go quite as low. With any squat, you should always only be able to go as low as feels comfortable with your body without you excessively rounding throughout your lower back or feeling that your feet have to come off the floor. You will notice here in this video that because I lack hamstring flexibility, I'm starting to just have some movement here that's not ideal for a low bar back squat. Ideally, you wouldn't notice any of that little bit of rounding throughout my... If I was to critique myself based on this video, I would tell myself to stop 1 or 2 inches higher than I am, as I'm going too low for the purpose of this movement, and I've lost tension here at the bottom where my hips are sitting in relation to the squat. The last thing that we're going to discuss here is going to be hand position on the barbell. Your hands are going to be relative to how your flexibility goes for you. I don't have the world's best flexibility, so you're going to notice that I have a relatively wide grip. There are people that have an even wider grip than this, but if you have the flexibility, then you might choose to have your hands even narrower. The goal is to create as much tension as you can on your back, which you would be able to create if you could have your hands a little bit closer. Some people feel a lot of pain in their wrists when their hands are too close, and they opt to have wrist wraps, which is totally acceptable for the low bar back squat.